Oftentimes, when we think of the Black empowerment movements or ideologies, we think of the American greats. However, given the fact that most Afro-descended people ended up in South America and the Caribbean, the idea of Black power was bound to be advanced in those regions as well. Today, I wanted to take a look at how Black empowerment expressed itself in the Caribbean. What up, African world? It's Home Team here, and welcome back to another video of African history, culture, and worldview. And if you like this content, you can support the continued development of these videos on patreon.com. There you can find sources and more in-depth full courses on African history. And with a word from my sponsors, there's a new social media platform dedicated to educating and uplifting our people. No longer do we have to be censored for speaking our truth. Our Black truth is Black owned and operated, and a place where you can post your businesses and even monetize your content. You can download the app at Google Play or the App Store, and you can visit the website at ourbblacktruth.com. Links to everything in the description box below. The idea of Black power appeals to various people of African descent in slightly different ways. Not all people of African descent are in the same social class, and so their experience with racism and white supremacy may express itself in a different way. Despite this, the second-class citizenship of Afro-descended people all around the globe tends to be a great unifier of sorts for the appeals of the Black power ideology. Black power rage, drama, and style as revolutionary jargon offers something to everybody. To the unemployed, the idealistic, the dropout, the communist, the politically frustrated, the anarchist, the angry student returning from humiliations abroad, the racialist, the old-fashioned Black preacher who has for years said at street corners that after Israel, it was to be the turn of Africa. Black power means Cuba and China. It also means clearing the Chinese and the Jews and the tourists out of Jamaica. According to William Lux, the Caribbean is composed of manufactured societies, a creation of European empires, if you will. One of the key components of the colonial mentality imposed on the mostly Afro-descended population within the Caribbean was no doubt the education system. The education system perpetuated the white supremacist status quo, creating little Black Englishmen steeped in English tradition and history. Now, this is in reference to the Anglophone Caribbean islands, but it also applies to other European influenced islands. The Prime Minister of Guyana, a product of the English system, said the following: "When we were younger, we remember being told about Henry V attacking at Agincourt and saying something about St. George. That was part of our education. Our own history was neglected, if not vilified. In fact, some of those who instructed us made a point, sometimes subtly, sometimes clumsily, of establishing to us that we had no history." Now, Guyana isn't technically in the Caribbean, but it's still socially accepted as such due to similar culture. This statement by one prime minister exemplifies, at least in part, a piece of the foundational issues in the Caribbean as it relates to the Black power grievance and ideology. In the Caribbean, the opposition of Black power is slightly different. For example, in America, the majority of people who opposed the Black power movement was white America and other non-Black people. But in the Caribbean, because the majority of people were of African descent, the opposition was more of a civil war between mindsets. But we'll get into that a little later. Over time, the Caribbean really had to define itself and form a unique identity because the old European models were just not effective in addressing the needs and concerns of the population, and so Black empowerment became one of the driving forces for this new identity. But of course, there were struggles along the way. William Lux tells us that while in Trinidad, the People's National Movement raised the level of material welfare, but it did not accomplish the redressing of the historical imbalance of giving the Black man a sense of being the master in the castle of his skin, In Guyana, however, they at least tried to address identity by incorporating Swahili in various school systems. The idea of Black power was even promoted on the national stage. The first successful manifestation of Black power was no doubt in Haiti during and after the Haitian Revolution. The Haitian Revolution, the first example of real Black power, spearheaded the movement in a tangible way for the rest of the Caribbean and even America to some degree. Religion especially became a tool of Black empowerment in the Caribbean. African religion played a huge role in the Haitian Revolution and served as a model for a legitimate spiritual foundation for advancement in the future. Haiti proved that in a remarkable and rather glorious way. And so African religion continued to flourish in the Caribbean in a powerful and more concentrated manner. African religion eventually married itself in some ways with the political process in the Caribbean, not only attaining spiritual power, but political as well. Perhaps the most adept person in developing Black religion as a Black power tool of potential political control, as Diedrich and Burt noted, was the late Francois Papadoc Duvalier. He recognized in the Haitian people the desire for recognition of their African past and developed an aberrated form of Black power to rule Haitian dog-eat-dog politics. Duvalier propounded for Haiti what he called negritude, or pride in the African origin of the people. He preached against the mulatto elite, the petit blanc, the cultural heirs of the white French, and won the respect of the poor Black masses, the descendants of the former slaves. The Dahomey-influenced religion of Voodoo became the official state religion under Duvalier. It was literally his so-called right arm of power, if you will. He studied the African religion, published a book on it, and won over the Haitian intelligentsia at the time, giving him the political power needed to rule. As leader, he brought voodoo priests to the presidential palace, which was a clear indication of his close ties to that spiritual authority. Now, of course, Haiti was not the only epicenter of Black power in the Caribbean. The first signs of Black power in the Caribbean were no doubt the endless revolts of enslaved Africans. Guyana's national hero was an enslaved African named Kofi. In a sense, he was the forerunner of the Haitian Revolution, as his revolt happened 30 years earlier. And of course, we cannot neglect Jamaica and the very influential Marcus Garvey. His influence stretched across the ocean into America. Among his goals was tackling Jamaica's gravest problems: chronic unemployment, discrimination against Black people in hiring white firms, and non-Black control of the country's wealth. Economics will always be the foundation of any sort of empowerment, and Marcus Garvey knew that very well. Unfortunately for the Black power movements across the Caribbean, as mentioned before, the old European educational system manufactured Caribbean leaders who upheld traditional European values. These individuals with that mindset who held power in the Caribbean are sometimes called AfroSaxons. The so-called AfroSaxon is defined as the educated, colored English gentleman who imitates European models established in the 19th century and who advances by denying. He subscribes to the unspoken but acknowledged philosophy of the European colonialist, which was, if in time the Negro acquires fitness to rule himself by proving himself equal to the established culture, in time, control of the system would be his for the asking. In other words, victory or success for the Afro-Saxon was by accommodation and self-rejection, and thereby his underdog inferiority was cured by conversion. It is against the Afro-Saxons who succeed the colonizers in the professions and in the civil service that Black power is rebelling, for the freedom that the Black man strives for is from the colonial system established by the European and not necessarily the European himself. This civil war in the Caribbean is unique as it compares to America, because even though the same dynamic exists in America, The American Anglo-Saxons do not hold substantial positions of power, especially in number, as they do in the Caribbean. The intelligentsia of the Black Power movement in the Caribbean knew that the key to their power and true Black empowerment was economics. The rebellion against the economic underdevelopment and ownership disparity was a principal grievance and target. Unfortunately, because of the several riots and even attempts at overthrow in Grenada, Bermuda, Curacao, Trinidad, and Jamaica, these governments began to clamp down on Black Power initiatives. Jamaica even banned the works of Malcolm X, Stokely Carmichael, and others. Black Power was a real threat to the Afro-Saxon, especially because his enemy was not physically identifiable. His attempts at crushing it can be seen as almost desperate. I think William Lux said something very profound as it concerns the mindset of the so-called Afro-Saxon in the Caribbean. The assumption that there is nothing of value in the Black man's cultural heritage, and therefore he should strive for a niche in the middle-class world as an Afro-Saxon, is fallacious. Well, I'm all out, guys. I'm hoping you were able to learn a little about Black Power in the Caribbean and how it slightly differed from America. It's important that we remember that our power comes from economic strength. Owning what we create will always be the real Black empowerment. And if you like these videos and want to help in its continued production, consider supporting the home team on patreon.com. The link is in the description box below. Know thyself. Remember your ancestors. Peace.